the Midvale Steel Company in Pennsylvania. In 1877, a 22-year-old clerk begins work, but in 3 short years had advanced to foreman and was managing the work of many men as they heated, hammered, and drew steel out of pig iron. This foreman was dissatisfied. He was consistently impressed by the failure of his workforce to produce more than about a third of a good day's work. That man was Frederick Winslow Taylor, and he was a dapper-looking fellow, as you can see. A precocious child, he was educated by his Quaker mother and was headed for a career as a lawyer. But despite passing the entrance exams to Harvard, he opted for a different path. Now, whilst working at Midvale, he also won the first ever tennis doubles championship in the US, the precursor to the US Open. His righteous frustration with the inefficiency of his steelworking brethren, and one presumes the lack of a pro tennis circuit, meant he focused on his work at the steel mill. And he's now known as the father of scientific management. It was even nicknamed Taylorism. After a couple of frustrating years, Taylor began to formulate an approach to attack these criminal inefficiencies. He was arguably the first management consultant. The dude wrote a frickin' white paper. As a corporate executive, he rubbed folks up the wrong way, but he found he could make a living as an independent, selling advice instead. The profession he thus created has been a haven for corporate misfits ever since. So, other than the melting point of steel being about the same temperature as the tweets of some folks in the Ruby community, why am I talking about Frederick W. Taylor, Esquire, when I run the technical side of a Rails-based software business in Brighton in the UK? I'm Andy. I've been Ruby and Railsing since 2007. My first RailsConf was here in 2015. I started Rails when it was 1.2, for those people keeping count. I've founded companies, I've worked inside imploding VC-backed startups, and I've consulted for big and small companies. I run a Ruby conference on the south coast of the UK. You should definitely come. And a little Ruby Tips newsletter. But most importantly, a mentorship program for new Rubyists that you should volunteer your time for, firstrubyfriend.org. Now, I was freelancing when I signed up to help CoverageBook as an experienced Rails consultant in 2016. Gary, the founder, had led an entirely bootstrapped team of 7, spun out of an agency. I made it part-time 8. The application had been up and running for a couple of years at that point. Soon after I joined, the team broke the 1,000-user barrier. This graph goes back to 2014. There have been a couple of failed product experiments before that. In other words, I'd missed the really hard bit of throwing money and time into an unknown. This is a marvelously embarrassing photo of the founder, Gary, from his first job interview, which I include to show quite how business we really are. I was brought in because the app had been smashed together. The team was somewhat inexperienced, and Gary, while doing a great job of understanding their customer needs, was building product management experience as he went. And the operations were on fire. So the first thing for 2017, Andy, to do was to reduce the temperature by rewriting some of the application. And to do that, I applied some advice from Taylor. There's some key things to pull out of Taylor's summary of his own methodology here. Standardization, the best tools, and cooperation. First up, standardization. Let's strip away that particular piece of Americana. Yes, I did just change the spelling of a word that describes consistency. It's my talk, my nationality, my spelling. Controversial opinion, Rails is pretty good. Is the best thing it ever did give us a standardized directory structure? Possibly. The app was a Rails monolith, done the standard Rails way, quick to market using default Rails tools. There was definitely the sense that if Rails has sharp knives, then the team were juggling with them. And the knives were on fire, and Gary kept helpfully adding extra knives because customers were asking for them. The issue was, having done the hard bit of getting the thing off the ground and becoming a functional business, no one knew what they were doing in terms of planning and operating a Rails application for the longer haul. Thank God they hadn't started with microservices, because all the chaos was at least in one code base. Now, the app allows users to report on the media coverage after their marketing efforts. So there's 2 main things the application does. It builds reports and does data collection. Within a few weeks, it was clear that the data collection was a serious, serious issue. Spiky traffic with hundreds of imports at a time would back up and block queries and prevent the user, sometimes all of the users, from using the application. And data collection was predictable, like a factory process. You resolve a web address, hit a bunch of APIs to pull some data, and take a screenshot. A standardized process, over and over again. A simple API boundary began to be visible as we began the rewrite within the application. There was also an ambition to use the rewritten data collection engine for future products. And so our monolith was rewritten into two. What's this architecture called? Microliths? Mini-lifts? Macro services? I don't know. The key to successfully rewriting and breaking out what we now call the vault was standardizing the process of data collection and its communication with the report builder. I'm absolutely not advocating breaking your application into ever smaller bits of infrastructure if you don't need to. But there might be some nice boundaries in your app already, and it might make sense to break them into other big-ish applications. It's a model that works for even big teams. Shopify has its core monolith, but there's a bunch of other Rails apps that are independent or semi-related. They don't have to manage the complexity of 1,000 microservices in whatever framework is hot right now. 37 Signals themselves has had a separate authentication Rails app for its multiple versions of Basecamp for years. So that bit went well. There's effectively still, 5 years on, only one API call from the main app to the rewritten data collection engine and a succession of webhooks in return. Onto a strategy that had been working for us already, the best tools. One of the fortunate things we had going for us, and still do, was the marvelous tools we could use to build on. So I'm going to throw this slide up here again. There is nothing, and I repeat nothing, that gets from wouldn't that be cool into production software I can maintain quicker than Ruby and Rails. It was true when I picked up in 2007, and it's true today. That's a hell of a run. I want to personally thank the folks I know who've dedicated huge chunks of their lives and careers to supporting and maintaining and finessing this language and framework. And I like to run my Rails apps in the cloud. I'm an unusual developer in that I pretty much have a reverse not invented here syndrome. I love to take Taylor's approach and take a tool that already exists and pay someone to run it for me. I don't want to get paged at night. Now, there's a ton of tools that we use. Some are great, some are not. Some were, but maybe aren't now. Heroku had been chosen because of its still unmatched 0 to text on the internet speed for the relatively new team. And it scaled marvelously for years. Importantly, we operated within the constraints of the platform. It's only recently that we've begun to look anywhere else. And that's down to Salesforce finally remembering that they bought it. A shout out to CrunchyBridge for taking on our not that big data. I'm super interested in the new approaches of tools like Fly and Render. If you've got experience using them, love to hear about it. We're Sidekick Pro customers. Is it probably the best money we spend? Yes, given our workload. Is it super easy for me to perform a denial of service attack on myself because it's so fast and I can't predict the future? Also yes. We've used a bunch of other tools over the years to enable our small team, and here's a couple of shout-outs to Postmark for email and AppSignal for monitoring. Now, I know that not the cloud is the new hotness, but the cloud is kind of a weird enemy, flattened of all nuance. So for me, the cloud is my operations team. If this is your idea of a simple app, you probably need operations people. In fact, if you're running a software business that has you running your own mail service, you probably do need lots of hardware. But that's not most folks. I imagine if you have an operations team, this menu isn't completely terrifying. But it is to me. By the way, this menu used to take up the whole screen. That's what I thought I was going to do when I put this slide together. It now scrolls for pages and pages. And none of the things are called what you would expect them to be called. What I'm saying is, before taking any advice from the loudest person in the room, including the current loud person speaking into this microphone, you might want to assess whether their situation in any way mirrors yours. This is as close to the metal as I want to get, because it makes sense for my team and its skills. If your business requires a lot of compute or storage, or you've got an operations team of 5 already managing your AWS bill, then knock yourself out, rack up your servers. It's about knowing your own business. Get used to paying for the stuff that doesn't differentiate you. And don't get stuck into complexity or building things you can buy. Or worse, cheap out on it. You'd be surprised how often another 200 or 1,000 bucks took away performance problems for us. And finally, to Taylor's last suggestion. And this is where the wheels fell off. The successful rewrite of 2 apps certainly removed some of the problems our application had, and we continued to grow customers and revenue. And that led within the team to an ambition to launch an all-new version of CoverageBook, another rewrite. It was born of a couple of major problems. We had incredibly poor database design and really complex and immovable front-end code. But it was also prompted by hubris. Smugly armed with the power of the Vault, a couple of the team went off in search of a sequel. It did not go well. Oh no, indeed. The business continued to grow, but there was no sign of a new version of the application, even 2 years on. So what the hell were we doing? Well, to explain that, I'm going to have to give away that I've been lying all this time. You see, we were having a marvelous time ruining everything. The problems we had in our team were similar to the problems of Taylorism. Frederick Winslow Taylor was coercive and patrician in his bones. I had somewhat paraphrased his principles from earlier. Enforced. Taylor believed in coercion and compulsion. Whilst there were successes as scientific management principles swept through the US and Europe, there were also widespread revolts and strikes in response to the removal of the autonomy that the workers had previously enjoyed. There were layoffs, dissatisfaction with monotonous and repetitive work, and there was mutual distrust as the resources were managed, and then the workers withheld knowledge that would have helped the wider organization. And this patrician coercive behavior had started to happen in our team. So why do we think about software development in terms of a factory or a production line, like the steel mills of Fred Taylor? Well, we don't. And Sarah May's talk at Brighton Ruby from 2016 has a wonderful metaphor that stays with me to this day. We're not a factory, we're not craftsmen, we're more like a group of performers on a stage. Everyone else has seen the weirdness, right? Like something's breaking into my slides. If you squint, you can see that some of those thumbnails a bit more clearly. And if you're as cool as this particular 43-year-old balding man, you might also recognize the background imagery. You see, the thing is, I think I might have been listening to the wrong Taylor. We tried to take inspiration from Fred Taylor's coercive model of work, when the real inspiration for this rewrite should be multi-Grammy award-winning singer Taylor Swift. So let's try this again, shall we? In the short time I've had to put this talk together, I did wonder if I'd bitten off more than I could chew. So I did what we're all doing now, and I fired up an overconfident AI language model. Flattery. That is how the machines will get us. A genuine answer, by the way. Not typically focused on industrial practices. So, not much help there. I guess my job is safe for now. But the fact is, Taylor Swift's an expert in rewrites. Her first 6 studio albums were released through Big Machine, having signed a deal with them when she was only 15. As is typical in early record deals, the label owns the masters, effectively the copyright to the produced work. The right to be paid in perpetuity whenever the recordings are used in movies, radio, played in lifts, played on speakers like this. As the primary writer of those tracks, Taylor gets paid as well. But the masters are where the control lies. And Taylor's albums made up 80% of the revenue of Big Machine. She wrote about her disappointment on Tumblr. She'd revealed she'd been offered the ability to buy back her albums one by one by recording 6 new albums with Big Machine. There's a lot more business shenanigans involving threats, rumors, counterclaims, Kanye West, body doubles, and resales. There's an article on Wikipedia, genuinely, if you want the detail. But what's important is what happened next. She immediately prevented the use of the original recordings for synchronization in movies and commercials using her songwriter's publishing rights. And then in 2020, she began to re-record her earlier albums, exactly duplicating the sound and production, and then offered these versions to fans and folks wanting to use her music. If you're a Swiftie, you listen to Taylor's version, not the disavowed originals. There's been 2 so far, and she's planning to do all 6. The move is genius. She both regains control of her work and devalues the exploitative ownership of the originals. So what can we learn from Taylor's maneuvering? During that difficult 2-year period, we'd wandered in the wilderness. There was an email tool, there were wild report designs of all shapes and sizes, all in the name of trying to find something better than what we already had. There were many uncomfortable meetings with the folks leading the rewrite in our team, and endless prototypes that were nearly done or just about to ship. What did we learn? It is okay to do the same thing again. No one was asking for the hot new thing that the egos were pushing, even though customers said they liked it when we showed them early versions. You know when you go and see a band and they say those terrifying words, "We've got loads of tracks from the new album to play tonight," and your heart sinks? You want them to play the fucking hits, right? We had got distracted trying to solve problems that didn't exist for our users. But we were also lucky. The stabilizing work we'd done meant the rewritten Vault continued to play the hits for our customers, old and new. We didn't do nothing during those 2 years. We even got a nice new logo. But we were distracted. The business might have suffered. Instead, we as a team suffered due to the lack of cooperation I talked about earlier. So let's get to that. A lesson we can all take from the last couple of years is to make the most of the unexpected. In summer 2020, Taylor was due to tour her latest album. Instead, like the rest of us, she was locked in her house, although I imagine her house is a bit nicer than mine or yours. I don't know if you remember 2020. It wasn't super awesome, and things got broken. None of us were at our most productive. April 27th was the date of that first tweet. It says, "Not a lot going on at the moment." On July 23rd, she surprised announced the release of an entire album, Folklore. Her pandemic album would be the hard rotation soundtrack to me working on what became known as Coverage Book 2, and more notably, perhaps, Album of the Year at the Grammys. And then 6 months later, in December, she pulled the same stunt again, dropping a second lockdown album, Evermore. Now, I have a major weakness for folk-infused women singer-songwriters, but that's not what we can learn from this. There's a couple of things going on in 2018 there. There's the continued growth due to our good fundamentals as a business, and there's the shitty time that we're having as a group of humans. This was due to coercive and destructive behavior from some folks in the team as they struggled with their personal difficult second album. So a smaller subset of us, to avoid working in the more contentious part of the rewrite, snuck off during those 2 years to our other product. You see, we'd always been quite good at engineering as marketing, and during those early days, we'd built free tools to build notoriety. And one of them, Answer the Public, built mostly by my colleague Dan, had started to get popular, like hundreds of thousands of users a month popular. We'd had to invest some time to re-engineer this app a couple of times as it grew, and it was always fun to creatively mess with the weird characters on the video on the homepage. So when things got tricky on Coverage Book, we stuck a paid plan on Answer the Public, and within 6 months, we'd added 25% of our customer base on this second product. It took off like a rocket. We went on working on Answer the Public for some of our product time, and it kept growing for 4 more years before, as a team, we decided the best move for us was to focus on Coverage Book and to sell Answer the Public. Now, you might ask, why sell when Coverage Book was hard and ATP was easy? And there's a bunch of reasons. But it's mostly about the future. Coverage Book was still the primary moneymaker, and there was, and is, vastly more space for improvement and, importantly, enjoyment working on that application. ATP was a fun distraction, but selling it allowed another team to take it forward. The longer story is another talk for another time, perhaps ask me over a beer. But the shitty time we were having as a team, dealing with the difficult people issues, meant we got creative and shipped something new. And we learned a valuable lesson. In 2021, one of Taylor's tracks from her album 1989, Wildest Dreams, began to trend on TikTok, which is a social network that I very much understand because I'm down with the kids. As a result, Taylor re-released the remastered version of the single track well in advance of the album. It's okay to only ship bits, to ship early. Because I had done that before. At a previous company, I'd taken the responsibility of a key page of a travel website whose existing implementation would show spinners, and it would spin, and it would spin, and it would spin. And I rewrote that within the app, removing 3 different JavaScript frameworks, 2 sets of views, and rendered on the server using good old HTML. It was such a success, a board meeting with investors was interrupted by somebody well above my pay grade asking, where did all the spinners go? A great way to focus your rewrite effort and move step by step, controller by controller, is to use naming, which is very important. You might be tempted to start a new layout, but you shouldn't. What you want to do is take your existing default naming, make it ugly, and then have to specify that across your whole app before you start. It's about setting your own internal expectations. Like every time you see old and busted in your code base, you'll know you need to finish the job. And every controller you rewrite means you get that buzz of deleting those words. We even took our compiled assets from the old and busted version, froze them, and served them straight from public. This is to set yourself up for the future, where your new design runs along Rails as defaults. This approach has also worked for us transitioning to new versions of the asset pipeline. I really wasn't keen to throw out the working code that was paying my salary, and I wasn't keen to throw out everything from the experimental applications that we'd built. There were some good ideas in the mistakes. We regrouped in 2019 and realized the best approach was to do the thing that we'd initially set out to solve, fix the fundamentals and make our lives better by making a product we can continue to support and improve. We did a version of the new defaults thing I just talked about, plus coupling that with an entirely new data structure, like literally a parallel set of models in the database linked only by the same overarching account. Knowing we didn't want to run the old version forever, we'd have to do a migration of customers' existing data at some point. Except we didn't wait for that to be ready before we moved. We made the first steps on the rewrite attempt in mid-2019, and we flipped the switch for new users on Coverage Book 2 in August 2021, just over a year after we started in earnest. We didn't tell any of our existing customers until December. There were some worries that the marketing website struggled to serve old and new customers, but it turns out the problem we were solving was so similar that no one even mentioned it. Fact is, most users don't even notice your changes until you move the one thing that they use all the time. That's when you should listen. However, spoilers, Emma on my team, who's in the room, did a completely fabulous job of writing incredibly complex, repeatable migration code. It was well tested and then tested against live accounts in the background of various sizes in production. And then the new reports were compared against the old ones for inconsistencies. We wanted to be belt and braces when it came to customer data. We paid for an enormous Postgres instance to solve issues doing intensive volumes of writes to our new tables, and tweak the settings so that the migrations would actually happen this century. The soft launch to only new customers in August went well. Like measures of trial to paid went up, customer satisfaction went up. We even gave ourselves the space of 6 months to create and polish additional features that only the old customers would miss, before deciding to execute the migration and move all the existing customers to the new system. We even gave them plenty of notice, launching pages of comparisons of the old and new versions of the site and extolling the benefits of the rewritten experience. Now, during the migration period, I also chipped in on support in the way we used to do when the team was smaller. This let me listen in to what users were saying as we spent a stressful month migrating all 2,000 of them. And what sort of things did they say? Motivational stuff. My particular favorite piece of feedback was a customer who angrily told me off for removing a feature that A, was never in the previous version of the software, and B, was in fact one of the primary new things that we had launched. But a lot of the customer pain was real. It is hard in those moments as you launch a new version of something to separate out the genuine problems from the allergy to change. You'll worry about all the emails you're sending to your user base in preparation for a big launch, right up until a bunch of them yell at you for not warning them, and then saying, can we go back? We went into an intensive few months to fix the most burning issues our customers had. These were a mixture of genuine misses on our part. Even with our long beta period, somehow we'd still miss stuff. Flipping a default where we'd heard 10% of customers who had a really strong opinion to change how something worked, and we agreed. And we changed it as part of the rewrite. But then we upset the 10% who silently had loved the way it worked before. There were also places where we didn't finish features, and we failed in our designs. We moved something, renamed it, or de-emphasized it, and users thought we took it away. We had to prioritize these misses, and it meant the migration period continued longer into 2022, which added stress on top of a stressful period. You can see that on the longer timescale, we've continued to grow. And those difficult launch months, which were expected, by the way, are fading into the past, like the first year after you bring your child home from hospital. It sure was exhausting at the time, but I can't quite recapture the horrible feelings I had. Particularly when you get to do fun PRs, like these ones. Because that's the thing. This talk's not even really about rewriting software. It is, as always, about people. For the longest time, we'd resisted the trappings of a larger company. We'd relied on the longevity of folks in the team and the trust that happens when you've been working with basically decent people for years. But this had caused its own problems. There's a lack of clarity. There's subsumed power structures. So we wrote down our company, I can't even say it. We wrote down our company values. Can we all agree that corporate values are brutally embarrassing? Even if these are arguably less generic than your normal set. These weren't new as a decision-making framework, but because of the cringe factor, they were new to being written down. And of course, they're only as useful as long as we work within them with fairness and humanity. I mean, this one's obviously open to abuse, illustrating that writing them down doesn't necessarily save your team from awful management. For us, this is about treating our business conservatively, giving us breathing room financially. We don't spend before we earn, because that always seemed needlessly risky. If we go back and look at the pure numbers of paying customers, you can't see the 2 years of trouble that we had as a team. You can see the pandemic slowdown, but that was not my fault. During 2020, our conservatism did pay dividends, as customers canceled in numbers unheard for us. But we had an effectively infinite runway. Like, no one was scared for their jobs, even as we had a few months where things got financially worse. This one is my favorite. Trust each other to wing it in style. This isn't about a lack of planning or encouraging carelessness, but it is an acceptance that we don't know the future. Winging it feels like the right balance of freedom, trust in your capability, but with a healthy respect for the things you don't know or can't predict. Here's another one that we live by, making life better for customers and also ourselves in surprising ways. The profitability rule of Coverage Book means we could go full Frederick Taylor and turn the screws on the folks in the team, work harder, faster, more command and control. How the hell didn't we pop over those difficult years? So the bars are the number of working days from the team each year. You'll note the amount of hours worked is absolutely not proportional to the number of customers we were helping, or what we accomplished in those years. And there was a second product for some of that time. The number of colleagues I have has increased, though. So how come the number of working days hasn't increased as well? Well, in 2018, most of the company moved to a 4-day week for 5 days pay. This was as a way of sharing the benefits of the business's success. And during the pandemic, we stuck to it. In fact, in 2020, the remaining couple of folks who joined later also moved to 4 days. From now on, everyone joins the team knowing they have a day to work on their garden, on themselves, or even frantically write pompous conference talks featuring pop stars. I believe this day off even helped us during the dark times of organizational strife and pandemic. Now this is the one we haven't always upheld. Not me, of course. I am a delight to work with at all times. As I've alluded to, we had a couple of personnel problems that were certainly a contributing factor to our small team being unable to make even basic progress on a rewrite in the early days. So we had to rewrite the team before we could successfully rewrite the software, bringing expertise we were missing and encouraging some folks who weren't working out to leave. The people changes were the reason we were able to finally build that cooperation, that shared understanding. The main failings Gary and I had, possibly related to our affection for winging it, was using hope as a management tool. Maybe this person will finish the project and they'll be happier. Maybe they'll learn from this PR review. Maybe they'll work better with the rest of the team this time. Things were immediately better once the decision was made to remove the more difficult folks from the team. It's not so clear, though. Whilst there are toxic people, this wasn't always the case here. Sometimes people outstay their expertise, and sometimes they're good for a certain point in time. Circumstances change, companies change, and people change too. Now, while there were definite issues that those individuals had, they had also contributed to the early success of our team, and they aren't solely to blame. The main failing falls at the door of me and Gary. We'd spent too long avoiding difficult conversations and difficult decisions. I hope this is a mistake I won't make in the future. Writing this talk's been an interesting process, trying to boil down years of work, almost the whole time since I was last in Atlanta, into nuggets of help for you lovely people. Now, Taylor Swift said when interviewed by NPR that songwriting is really just storytelling, and it's always been my way of understanding life. And I guess this talk is that for me. It's been famously said that opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one. If you go on the internet, a bunch of guys, and it will be guys, will give you advice loudly. The advice won't understand your context. The advice will be more about them than it is about you. Even though Mastodon has somewhat replaced Twitter in our little niche, it hasn't replaced the casual cruelty that people toss out in the name of being right. Just a nudge for the next time you have a strong and correct opinion. Maybe don't publicly shame someone in Slack or in a pull request or into the happiness void of social media. Try and take a moment and understand the normal human problems in the way that Frederick Winslow Taylor never did, and Taylor Swift always tries to. He felt he was burdened with great purpose to correct those around him. But there are things to learn from Fred Taylor's mechanistic view. There's plenty we can take intellectually from the principles of scientific management, certainly as software engineers. But for God's sake, understand that removing the human from the process isn't going to work. Abdicating a duty of care to the people who work for you is not smart management. And dogma is a hiding to nothing. You have to walk your own road. And I've sort of shared mine. I started this project believing it was a series of technical problems, which it was, but only up to a limit. The changes I made for customers seemed tiny, but broke their fragile mental models of how my software worked. I discovered I was not only rewriting the software, but also the team. What does good software look like? What does a good team look like? There's a hard one understanding that my need to be nice was sometimes causing more problems than I realized for the wider team. So I had to rewrite the view of myself, too. And you should know that any advice in this talk is colored by my circumstances and my preferences. I'm a middle-aged white guy who's terrible at DevOps and is only interested in running small teams with a conservative approach to cash flow. But I am interested in making those small teams punch well above their weight. According to ChatGPT, Taylor Swift doesn't have much to say on industrial process or software engineering. But she's award-winningly good at understanding the relationships between people, her place in the world, and taking the mess of being human and then rewriting that mess into universal songs. Looking back on our approach to Coverage Book and its rewrite, it was only possible because of the way that we decided to do our version of doing business. There's a lot of self-reflection required to do a really hard thing over multiple years. So I encourage you to look inward and muddle your own way through the problems in your team or your software. Find inspiration in strange places, but know that sometimes you've got to grit your teeth and just push hard. But make sure you take care of yourself and take care of the folks around you. And finally, look up and look out to our wider Rails community. Can you rewrite and re-examine the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we do? By all means, take the positive things you've learned and share your knowledge generously. But please share your empathy too, and don't forget that everyone is just winging it with style, even if they stand on a stage with a microphone and pretend to know what they're doing. Thank you very much.